Yes, I'm the Director of Climate and Sustainability, and one of our top priorities is education and youth empowerment. Another one is partnership facilitation, which is what I do for the Planetary Emergency Partnership. And I also advise the UN on the UN Food System Summit. And the topic of food in particular is quite complex because it's connecting climate, people, and nature, and we have to look at it in a very systemic way. So I will talk about some of my experience and share some insights for all of you. By the way, I'm also a teacher by training, so I teach whenever I can, when I find the time. Thank you so much for this invitation. I just wanted to start. You may have seen today that today is the opening of the World Economic Forum online. Of course, they're not meeting in person in Davos. And there are two big reports that just came out. One is came from Oxfam International, who's calling COVID-19 the virus of inequality. So of course we knew that, but to have figures on the table is really quite shocking. And what the report is showing is that actually that the billionaires are actually getting richer and richer. After a quick drop at the start of the pandemic, they are now getting richer again, whereas the poor people will need at least 10 years to catch up. So this is a major social crisis. This is why we are talking about a triple planetary emergency, an emergency for people, an emergency for climate, because we know that the planet is warming at an accelerating rate. We have now 9 out of the 15 tipping points that are being triggered in terms of the melting ice, the Amazon forest that is burning. You've seen all these fires around the world, and the oceans are warming up. So this is really, really urgent. But also the biodiversity crisis with more than 1 million species that may disappear in the next few years. So this is a major crisis for people, for climate and nature. And the only way we can address this crisis as learners and as facilitators and teachers is to look at it through a systemic lens. So I'm now going to turn into your question, what do learners need to be, understand, and do? Where I think really the starting point is to have a systemic vision of this crisis. And to reinforce what Alison was saying is we need more solidarity in this world. I mean, this Oxfam report is really shocking. And this is all of us showing solidarity with our family, with our neighbors, in our communities, with people who are suffering in the global south, being also very conscious about what we buy here in the developed world and our impacts on the south. And action and urgency, that's also very important because time is running out. And I would like to say that to the youth leaders as well, that it's not enough to be on the street and to be protesting. We need youth leaders in politics. We need youth leaders voting. We need youth leaders also as candidates for elections. We need youth leaders on the board of companies as actors, not only as people marching on the streets, which we can't do anyway right now. So in terms of what learners need to be today, and I'm also talking about myself, I'm including myself in this, I think the first thing is to be resilient. We are going through a difficult time for all of us. I mean, of course, the most vulnerable people are hit in a way that's much harder for us who live for many of us in rich countries where we have social security, etc. But even for us, it's sometimes hard to be away from our family, relatives, to be isolated, to be in this time of uncertainty. So I think resilience is, to be resilient is really the first thing we have to do. And this is not only about the system, it's also about yourself as a person. So something that's helping me a lot, for example, is to do mindfulness, meditation. I mean, maybe it's not the topic for today, but I think reconnecting to yourself as a person, about your values, what is really essential to you, I think that's very, very important. A lot of self-care for your health, both physical care, physical health, and mental health is really super important. A lot of young people are now really depressed. We see an increasing rate of suicide, including on campus. And so I think this is really a time also for all of us to support this new generation, to be resilient and to give the tools for this resilience. The second thing is, so I've been talking about the values, I think this is also what Alison was saying, to show solidarity, to show a lot of empathy, because a lot of people are suffering around us. So I think we need to be listening to others, listening to ourselves, and also listening to nature, because in a way the pandemic is a signal from nature that there is something that is wrong in our system and that we need to rebalance this relationship between people and nature. So I think listening to nature, listening to other people, listening to ourselves. What is it that we need to understand and know? Where, of course, it's always easier if we know about the science. So listening to scientists, climate science, what's happening around the world, why is it accelerating? Now also listening to the scientists who are telling us that this pandemic is very much linked to biodiversity loss. Learning about policy and politics is super important. Of course, the relationship between now everything is changing so quickly, also in terms of the international relations between the politics in the US, in China, or the EU. So knowing the context around you is important, not staying in your bubble. Economics, why do people buy a four-wheel drive or not? I'm just thinking about carbon pricing, but I think economics is super important also. And the Club of Rome is doing some fascinating work on how we can go beyond GDP growth, how we can change our economic system. And what we need to know and understand, maybe this is the one that's the most difficult one, is the connection between all these disciplines. And at school, I guess, we always learn about things in silos, we don't make the connections. So more interdisciplinary learning is also super important. And I know Kern is doing this program where he's really making all of these connections and looking at projects. If you want to implement a large project, you need to look at it in a systemic way and not just through only climate science or only policy, only one topic, but looking at the whole thing. What we also need to understand and know, and that's maybe reassuring, is also that the best way to have an impact is movement building. And I think it was Greta who said, "You're never too small to make an impact." The reason why Greta has such an impact is because she built a movement behind her. And so I think for learners as well, if they learn how to build a movement very quickly, very early on, that will really help to make a difference in the future. I've got 3 points, 3 ideas to accelerate this positive change in the mindset. So number 1, radical collaboration. I think Gael used that word. That's very much in our DNA. That's something we do as facilitators, and we've put that at the heart of Planetary Emergency Partnership. We have now 300 partners on board, but we use that same idea of radical collaboration for other partnerships as well, for the Nature-Based Solutions Coalition at the Climate Action Summit, now on resilience as well. And I think this idea is that we're all working as one team on one planet. So we need to go beyond our egos and logos and beyond the silos and work together and think we have one mission now, is to save ourselves. It's not only about saving plants and animals, it's also about saving human beings and saving the next generations. So that's this idea of radical collaboration, and that's something that learners need to learn at school, where at school people learn about studying really hard and being in isolation and getting the best grade and being very competitive. And so we need a space for radical collaboration, and in a way this is what Kern is doing with team building and people working on projects with a common objective, which is the planet. The second one is girls and women empowerment. I think this is a really important way of accelerating change in a positive way. If you look at the Project Drawdown report, it's one of the top solutions to accelerate climate action, but also to build resilience in developing countries where girls and women are being impacted by climate, but also because women, I'm not saying men don't care, but women do care about the next generation, especially when they become a mother. And I'm a mother of 2 children. And so there's something very deep and strong there. And if you look at what Jacinda Ardern is doing in New Zealand, for example, it's very, very inspiring. So I think women leadership is absolutely essential, and it starts at school. And the third one is about what Kirsten was saying, our values, being humanist and connecting to ourselves, connecting to others, connecting to nature. So a sense of deep listening to ourselves, to other people, and to nature. and also having a lot of more self-awareness, more empathy. And that's something that's very deep, that comes down to our values, which we don't necessarily learn at school. Sometimes it's more in our families, but I think it's also something very, very important, where actually maybe this is something missing in Western education. I think that actually, you know, if you go to China or India, there's a lot more about mindfulness, about learning about ourselves, all these values, and a sense of spirituality in a way that is missing maybe in our Western world. That's all.